George always had to have a human soul in it. We had an incredible actor, Jason Lyles. He trained for hundreds of hours with our movement coach, Terry Notary, and really transformed himself into becoming a real silverback gorilla.
It's okay. It's okay to be scared. Come on.
Watching Jason Lyles becoming George was an unforgettable experience for me, but it was also very educating for me, and it really gave me a newfound respect for mocap performances.
George! Stop! George!
Allow the body to marry into that look with the mind, okay?
I feel like we should really train someone to move like a gorilla and perform like a gorilla. I need to hire the best person in the world to train them.
Terry Notary is the best movement coach on the planet, hands down.
Terry came in and he talked to me about it, and I mean, Terry's like a total sweetheart, and I'm like, you can act like a gorilla? He did it for me. He performed as an ape, and he scared the shit out of me. Well, he was like 15 feet away, and then he ran up to me. Because it was intimidating, you know, that was his point. He was like, that's how animals are.
It's not this. It's this.
Terry Notary is the best on the planet. He's the best human alive that we know that can do this.
I've done 4 apes films, so I've done a lot of research with apes. I've gotten to work with apes personally.
That was pretty much the foundation of how I started to figure out what it was that made people perform as an ape, really, truly. There you go. Let it live. Let it live. That's excellent. Boom, you're doing it. When I was brought onto this film, I was asked to work with Jason Lyles, who is playing George. He's playing a giant gorilla.
So then getting to work with Terry Notary was just like absolutely amazing, because at the time we were training, he was King Kong in theaters, so King Kong was teaching me how to be a gorilla. But I didn't know until I started training with Terry how much of it was the psychology and the psyche of being a gorilla.
Let your gut drive you. That's everything. What it boils down to is it's not playing an ape at all. It's actually just deepening yourself, and because apes, they're just really deep, really connected humans. That's really what they are. And it was all about just letting go of what makes us human, really. The ideas of all the social conditioning that we have and the way of speaking from the front body. We tend to want to explain things and telegraph things like I'm doing right now. Apes tend to be drawn back and in. They sit back in themselves and they root down and they really connect. There's a wisdom, there's an old soul in the ape world.
It really was getting down to the most core human you can be, just instinctive and present and grounded and kind of like an untrained mute human in a way, really.
So you start with a blank slate, create a neutral body, and then we can start building the foundation. Do they drive with their head? Do they drive with their heart? Do they drive with their gut? I want you to just live through the looks now. Look, just look.
Beyond just the physicality of being able to be on the arms and physically embody a gorilla, I have to also bring in the characteristics and the personality that George has, that no other gorilla has.
The commitment he put into becoming George, and the emotion, and even the sensitivity in his eyes that we'd have through these stages of George, it's mind-blowing.
What became incredibly startling was how good Jason was, incredibly complex, nuanced, real.
Because if that didn't work, the movie doesn't work.
It always boils down to the subtleties, the flit of the eyes. You want to fall in love with George. You want to see the relationship between Davis and this beautiful creature, that they have this special synergy and this connection and this way of communicating. And it's through joking and it's through laughter and fun.
Wow. I can't, come on. I should never have taught you that.
This is one of the arm extensions. They're designed by Terry Notary from all the Planet of the Apes movies, Hobbit, and stuff like that. But it's impossible, really, to be a gorilla on all fours without these. This gives you the anatomy of a gorilla in order to play one physically.
Receive the ground as you go. Receive. Articulate through the ground. Good. The first thing is to find a nice, beautiful neutral. And you want to have that soft connection. There's no hard grabbing. Basically, you get into quad walking, the trot, and then the quadruped. They just start to feel like you miss them when they're not on you.
The third morning on these arms, I was sore head to toe. It was physically exhausting, but it is a lot of fun. We practice everything. But the hardest thing was just sitting here on a chair and just getting to this place where you see stuff as a gorilla. You can't describe it in words. You just have to be like, oh, I felt it. I know what you mean.
When I was working with Jason, that's what we were really working on the first week.
It blew me away. It revolutionized how I create a character, how I play a character.
Hey, Mark.
Terry Notary's daughters were on set for a few days in that first scene when we're in the San Diego zoo enclosure. Sky and Willow, and they're just amazing. They've done this for years. They've done it longer than I have, and they're great. Every take, you're killing it. It's perfect.
I like watching the Weta Digital people like turn you into an ape. That's like the coolest part.
I like motion capture because it's cool that just many cameras, it can turn you into a goblin or a puppy dog, anything, whatever you create.
They were fantastic. I really hope I get to be gorillas with them again someday.
You know, they're Terry's kids, so they're gonna be amazing at being gorillas and apes and all that stuff.
Family.
It's been really great just seeing how Jason is starting to really imbue this character. It's really not him playing a character, it's Jason's inner George.
I know that he lived with gorillas and studied them for 2 months. You know, he's the Jane Goodall of actors.
He brought his performance to a whole other level, which helps you to bring yours to another level as well.
It's the most freeing, pure imagination, fun place that I've ever gotten to in my life, and it's all Terry Notary.
George.
I obviously couldn't do this role without Weta. Obviously, it would just be me and PJs.
They take the realism aspect and they pride themselves on giving you the truth.
They know how to bring creatures to life in a way that isn't just like doing dragons or monsters or other things. They actually make characters.
Very funny. We're all very impressed. Yes, yes. You and I laughing at your joke, okay? New guy, he no laugh.
I think there was no question that George had to be a performance capture. The emotion that we wanted to be able to pull from the audience and to be able to pull from Dwayne, it was essential to have someone that was as photoreal and that could kind of perform and give that, pull that emotion from him.
We're not just in a stage. We had to do motion capture in really pretty crazy like outdoor environments.
It's really groundbreaking. The visual effects technology that's used in this movie has never been seen before.
With Jason, we used an approach of on-set performance capture where we basically place motion capture cameras all around the actual live-action set. Jason, the performer in this case, is wearing a motion capture suit.
And so they stick these dots on me in very precise places. These infrared cameras, there's 25 or 30 around on every set we shoot that Weta sets up. They pick up all these dots that make a skeleton, and nothing else is picked up. They don't see anything else on those cameras. You can be standing right next to me and you're invisible. They take that skeleton of those dots and those movements, and they copied it into the model of George. And so then anything I did, now George does the exact same.
George, no!
And they do that with the face as well. The face are very precisely put black dots of makeup.
And the performer wears a helmet with some cameras rigged to his face. And in this particular instance, we stepped it up by having 2 cameras so we could get a little bit of stereo depth in the tracking, which just gives you that little extra bit of fidelity. And that is particularly useful for things like lips and jaw thrust. Motion capture is only half the puzzle. The other half of the puzzle is our facial models team. Taking our facial model, which we've been iterating on and developing, and then we take our facial track, and then we marry these 2 things together. And so all these little dots that are moving around on Jason's face start to drive all these muscles on our puppet's face.
That is where they take my performance, my emotions, and put them directly into George.
Good boy. No.
That gives Weta this incredible place to work from this wonderful performance from Jason, and then they can kind of put the layers and do their thing.
And you get quivering muscles that to the naked eye you could never actually tell is happening, but that's what brings the nuance and the face really to life.
When you see George and you know Jason, you're like, that's Jason. Colin and I recognize Jason inside of George. We'll see an animation pass and we're like, that's not Jason. And you could pick them out, like from a mile away. You could be like, oh, that's not our motion capture. It was like night and day.
The most successful way to do that is always to find features from the actor and sneak them into the character that they are playing. In the case of Jason, we looked at some of the features of his chin, you know, around his eyes in particular.
And Jason's really energy comes through in George. His eyes, his mouth, his nose.
Everything that's really George, normal size, is 100% Jason. The performance, the faces, the breaths, everything is Jason.
So now I look at what they show me and I see myself. I can recognize myself. It's really weird.
What Jason is doing facially just made a huge amount of difference and impact into the relationship we were able to create with Dwayne and George.
The combination of Jason's performance, the magic of Weta, marriage of those two really created George to be what I think is a character that you've never seen before.
I just saw you open your eye. Son of a bitch!